So you have a shop that was healthy business-wise and you had a niche. Things were going well, the shop was making money, but all of a sudden that niche starts to slow down. What happens if you don't cut your losses, and what happens if you fail to pivot? What's up, guys? Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine Tool, back here again for Practical Machinist. And on this episode of Machine Shop Talk, we're going to be talking about some of those niches, some of those pivots, and some of the real pitfalls and advantages that can happen if you pivot too fast, pivot too slow, or fail to pivot at all. But before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so as promised today, we are going to be heading back into some territory that we have talked a little bit about before, but we're going to kind of talk about a different angle from it. One thing I've advocated for a lot here, and a lot of other people do as well, this is not unique information, is that if you are a small shop, and I mean even if you're a big shop, but especially if you're a small shop, there's a lot of advantages to find your niche. So what that means is that if you are a standard machining job shop like mine, you got some mills, you got a lathe, maybe a wire EDM, maybe a laser, one other kind of little special treat on top of your lathes and mills, you can compete in the standard job shop market. And what that means is a customer out there needs a part made, you make the part, they get the part, you get money, everybody wins, right? The complicated part of this, especially during times like today, when I think we can all agree that there is some uncertainty in the market, certain areas are softening up, is that if you are doing work that anybody can do, everybody is your competition. So if the barrier to entry is low, if the barrier to entry to doing a part is I have a mill, you're competing with everybody that has a mill. So when things start to slow down, like we're seeing out there, that's when you start to get the race to the bottom. So one guy usually bills $150 an hour. Now he's going to bill $100 an hour to get the work. And then this lady over here with her shop, now it's going to bill to $80. And then this other guy over here with his shop is going to bill to $60. Then all of a sudden, everybody's working for $45 an hour, shops close, and away we go. Not saying this is what happens, but this is what can happen. And I mean, we've all seen it happen time and time again. The knowledge and the barrier to entry is kind of what separates a niche from general job shop market. Like I said, if you're competing with everybody, you do not have a very defensible position in that market. Yeah, you can have your relationships. Yeah, you can have your timeline, your capacity, but you're really kind of in an open market. On the other hand, if you find your niche, this becomes a much less crowded market and a lot more defensible position. So for instance, a shop that specializes in doing only high-end auto equipment, or a shop that specializes in doing only tube bending tooling or punch tooling. These little niches where they focused a lot on learning how to do this well. They invested the time to learn it. They invested the money to train people to do it. They invested the money in the equipment, in the process. They spent a lot of time specializing, into this spot where it becomes very, very difficult to compete with them. Because they're so good at it, they could do a job that would take you on your machines 3 hours in an hour. So you can't really compete with them on price, the knowledge, etc. I think we all know a company like this. You hear about a shop in town and you're like, man, if I just had the knowledge of what goes into that part or what's important, I could compete with them all day. But the fact is, you don't. You haven't specialized in it. But the difficult thing where this starts to become problematic is in times like these as well, or at least times when things get weird. If you are in a niche, while you might be more isolated from the market at large, so you're not competing with every shop out there, you become a lot more vulnerable to disruptions in that niche or in that market. So case in point, a good thing to look at is my company, Lakewood Machine Tool. As you guys know, we've been here for 38 years, so we've gone through a lot of transitions over the years. And while I've talked a lot about when we went from stamping tooling to CNC, there was actually another niche we were in for quite a while that was interesting and worth talking about. One avenue we went down, and this was one of many, we've had lots of rabbit holes and side quests over the years, some more successful than others, but one was electronic tooling. And I know I say we do electronic tooling now, but this was different. Back in the day, and I'd have to ask my old man specifically how this happened, but one of our electronics company customers that we were doing, I don't know, fixtures and stuff for, said they needed these machines to bend and form bend and form the leads of electronic components. So, like an LED has two leads that come out. They would need them cut to a certain length and formed so that they could go into the PCB. So we made and designed that for them, as far as I know, worked really well. And we said, hey, this is a common problem in the industry and not a lot of people are solving it. Let's make these machines. So that's what we did. We made cutting machines that would cut the leads to a certain length. We made forming machines. We made component counters. I'd have to go grab an old catalog and see just how many there were. And we went wide with them. So I remember my old man going to trade shows all over the place for, not machining industry to sell these machines. And a lot of companies bought them. They were very successful for a point in time. They were interesting because they had a niche between, they were too expensive and too overkill for the hobbyist market. The guy building PCBs in his garage is not going to buy one of these machines. But they were also not advanced enough for, the SMT, CNC, pick and place machines. The machines where you put in a PCB board and it just goes pop, 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 and put those around. And this was in like the mid 90s to early 2000s. So a lot of that technology, the SMT pick and place was still way up here in terms of price. So they had a market within a market. And, they said, well, we can make a lot of other machines for this industry. And they did so. But again, because this was a market within a market, so a niche almost within a niche, it was very vulnerable to disruption in that market. And what happened, much as CNC machines, the price came down and they got more widely adopted, those SMT pick and place machines came way down in price. They started getting manufactured in Asia instead of Germany. Companies that couldn't afford them before can't afford them. They got way more capable. You didn't need to preform leads or anything. So all of a sudden, that market got disrupted hard. Now, the thing to keep in mind here, there was nothing wrong with the product that we made. It was successful. It worked really well. I still sell parts for them. This is almost 30 years later. I get inquiries all the time from companies in the States and Europe saying, hey, I need a new form blade for my LD 450 lead trim machine. Sure, we'll make them. So these things are still in use 30 years later. But the problem is we were not in a position where we could invest a ton in R&D to compete and catch up with these giant SMT pick and place companies. We didn't have millions of dollars to throw at a research team to now take these little machines and build them into, CNC-sized $1 million machines. So what we did is we pivoted, much like we pivoted from stamping tooling more into CNC. This is one that we kind of let go. We kind of said, all right, we'll keep selling them until we run out, but we're not going to market, we're not going to sell these hard. The reason this is important is that we went to a lot of the companies that we were doing these machines for that we weren't doing machining for and said, hey, listen, you know us from the LD450, the LD30, whatever they are machines. We also solve a lot of problems for a lot of our other customers. What can we do? Some of those companies said no. Some of those companies went away, came back. Other companies stayed with us, and some of those companies are our biggest customers today. But we had to pivot from, hey, we only sell you these machines, to, hey, we can do a lot of other stuff. What else can we do? And now we do a lot of different niches within those markets. Had we stuck with those machines, we did have other work. We had the stamping tooling. We had everything else. We could have sat there and kept pushing those for years. We could have kept trying to innovate incrementally. We could have kept trying to find new markets for them. There was a chance we could have been successful there, but when you look at the odds are that would have folded eventually. So it was a good time to exit. So by pivoting, we actually not only made money, but we saved a lot of money we could have dumped into that program that we hadn't. The point I'm making here is that, as a lot of shops out there, as small shops, we always look at the big shops and go, wow, if I had that kind of manpower, if I had those kind of machines, if I had that sales force, that engineering, I could do crazy things. Big shops are like really, really big boats on the ocean. So when they're going in the right direction, they have more power than you can imagine to move that business forward. They can call in $20 million, put new machines on the floor. They can get loans. They can, work to those economies of scale that we can. But if that big ship is going in the wrong direction, there's a rock up ahead and they got to turn, those ships turn really, really slow. Little shops, we're kind of like speedboats. You know, we don't have the power to haul a container across the ocean, but we can pivot and turn really fast. So if you're going this way, there's a rock, oh, I'm gonna go this way. Oh, there's another rock there. You can kind of keep ping-ponging and see what works. You know, it's the agility end of things. So sometimes you do have to try a lot of different things before you find the things that work. You know, you may think there's a certain niche for a kind of work, you know, listen, I'm always buying this part, the lead time on them sucks. I think I can make these, and if I don't like the lead time and the quality, I'm sure other people don't too, and then try it out. But you may need to try that out before you even see if there's a viable market for it. The key is to get in quickly, you know, have some internal velocity in your company to say, all right, we're gonna prototype this, we're gonna get to market as quick as possible on as small as of a budget as we can to test it. And if it doesn't work, we pivot right back out. You know, the key is to recognize when something is working and when something is not. That is more difficult than I could explain in a 10-minute video because I don't even understand fully myself when something's working. You know, there's a lot that goes into that. But, you know, it's being able to be agile and keep pivoting and follow what's working. I can't say I've always got this right. Like I said at the beginning, we've gone down a lot of different rabbit holes and side quests over the years. Some have been great, some have been not so good, some have, you know, turned into a different kind of business because we tried to sell something into a company, didn't work, but hey, can you do this stuff? Yes, we can. There's a happy medium between being a, you know, hyperactive child bouncing off the walls and being so entrenched in a niche that if something changes, you get wiped out. You know, you want to avoid the ADD, bouncing around, just trying to find something, but you also don't want to get too married to something that if that market decides to take a dive, you're stuck. You know, this isn't the right approach for everybody, but a little thought I thought I'd put in your head anyway. In any case, guys, I'd like to know how you guys have pivoted your business over the years in the comments below. You know, did you start in one direction, find a different one? Did you start trying to do one product? You realize actually it's a product 2 steps away from that that's important? Let us know in the comments below because this is how we help each other. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. You take care.